A cruise ship is, in some ways, the worst possible vehicle for finding a human being in open water. It is too slow to stop, too tall to see from, too loud to hear from. And by the time anyone on board realizes a passenger is missing, that passenger has almost always become a dot on a map that no longer exists. Roughly 20 people go overboard from cruise ships in a typical year. Across the best industry data sets, somewhere between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 are recovered alive. The rest disappear into a search area that, depending on time of day, weather, and how long the body was unaccounted for, can swell to the size of a small country before anyone is even sure where to look. When most people picture a cruise overboard rescue, they picture the cartoon version. The ship snaps around. A ring flies into the water. A boat is lowered. A grateful passenger is pulled aboard, slightly damp, slightly embarrassed. Almost none of that happens the way it's imagined. The ship does not snap around, the ring is not really for the person, and the boat, when it eventually launches, is often launched into water, where the missing passenger is no longer present. What actually unfolds when the call goes out is not a rescue in the heroic sense. It is a forensic investigation racing a hypothermia clock across an ocean that is structurally hostile to being searched. It is mostly video review, math, radio coordination with strangers, and the slow grinding mechanics of turning something the size of a small skyscraper into something pointed in the opposite direction. The cruise ship is not really the rescuer at all. It is the alarm. Consider James Michael Grimes. Thanksgiving Eve 2022. He fell from the Carnival Valor somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. He doesn't remember falling. He woke up in the water with no ship in sight, no flotation device, and by his account, a long night of jellyfish stings and shadows ahead. He treaded water for roughly the 20 hours. He was eventually spotted not by the cruise ship, not by a Coast Guard aircraft on a planned patrol, but by a passing cargo vessel that happened to glance the right direction at the right moment. A U.S. Coast Guard Jayhawk helicopter then lifted him out. He survived. He is one of the lucky names in a dataset full of names that never came back. Which raises the obvious question. If cruise lines have well-rehearsed protocols, trained officers, lifebuoys, helicopters on call, and modern navigation, why are the odds this brutal? Why does the average story end the other way? To understand the answer, you have to stop thinking about the rescue and start thinking about the constraints. The first constraint is purely physical. A modern cruise ship at cruising speed is a moving city block. To bring it from 20-plus knots to a full stop in the open ocean takes well over a nautical mile and several long minutes. The bridge can call for emergency stop, but the ship still glides forward through inertia, water pushing against a hull the length of 3 football fields. By the time the ship is stationary, the person in the water is a tiny speck somewhere behind it, and the ship itself has now drifted off the exact line where the fall happened. The second constraint is the detection gap. This is the single most important variable in the entire rescue equation, and almost nobody outside the industry talks about it. Survival doesn't really depend on how fast a ship can turn. It depends on how quickly anyone realizes there's a problem at all. In many documented overboard cases, the gap between the person leaving the deck and someone reporting them missing is not minutes, it's hours. Sometimes it's a full day. Sometimes the only reason an absence is noticed is that a family member shows up to breakfast and finds an empty seat. That gap in turn drives the third constraint, which is unforgiving search geometry. A point on a map at the moment of the fall is just that, a point. Add 30 minutes of drift in current and wind, and that point becomes a square mile. 6 hours and it becomes hundreds of square miles. 12 hours with shifting weather, and you are searching a band of ocean larger than several U.S. states. The math compounds against you the entire time. Every minute of detection delay makes the problem exponentially harder. The fourth constraint is engineered into the ship itself. Under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act of 2010, U.S.-bound passenger ships are required to have rails at least 42 inches above the cabin deck. That measurement is not arbitrary. It's high enough that a normal adult, standing or leaning, cannot tip over the edge by accident. The structural consequence is uncomfortable, but documented. Almost every fall from a modern cruise ship requires deliberate climbing, severe intoxication, recklessness, or worse. This changes the entire character of an overboard investigation. It's almost never a simple tumble. The fifth constraint is silence. Around 3/4 of fatal overboard cases happen at night. Balconies, empty decks. Alcohol implicated in studies that put it in the majority of incidents. There are no witnesses. There is rarely a scream loud enough to compete with the wind and engine noise. The ship doesn't learn about an overboard from a shout on the deck. It learns from an empty cabin in the morning or a worried sister who can't find her brother. Stack those 5 constraints together and a new picture emerges. The cruise ship's biggest enemy isn't the ocean, it's the silence. By the time the system knows it has a problem, the problem is often already unrecoverable. The rescue protocol isn't really fighting the sea. It's fighting the hours of nothing that pass before anyone notices an absence. So what actually happens when somebody does notice? It starts with a code. Across the industry, the words are different, but the function is identical. Oscar, Oscar, Oscar. Mr. Mob to the bridge. Something quiet and specific, broadcast over the PA in a tone meant to summon crew without panicking passengers. The general alarm, the kind that empties a casino, is not used. The bridge takes the helm off autopilot. The watch officer's hands move very fast. The first real act is not to chase the person. It's to mark the water. The officer hits the man overboard button on the ship's electronic chart and information system, which freezes a GPS waypoint at that exact second. A specialized life buoy is hurled from the bridge wing, one rigged with a self-igniting light and a self-activating smoke marker. That buoy is not really for the casualty to swim to. The casualty is too far back and the buoy will drift differently from a human body anyway. It is a visual reference for the search. It tells aircraft and other vessels where the ocean was when the alarm went out and how the surface is moving since. Then comes the maneuver. The bridge has 3 documented choices, and which one gets used depends on visibility and how long ago the fall happened. If the person was just seen going over and is still visible from the bridge, the officer uses an Anderson turn, sometimes called a single turn, where the rudder swings hard toward the side of the fall and the ship loops through roughly 250 to 270 degrees. It's the fastest way to come back. If visibility is poor, if it's night, or if the fall happened slightly earlier and the casualty is no longer visible, the bridge uses the Williamson turn. The Williamson deviates the ship 60 degrees off course, then reverses the rudder and brings the vessel onto a near-perfect reciprocal heading, retracing its own track through the water. If the fall happened long enough ago that the ship is now well past the point, but elapsed time is known, the Charnow turn brings the ship back into its own wake from further behind. Pause on this for a moment. A vessel the length of 3 football fields carrying a small floating city is being U-turned through the open ocean using maneuvers codified in the middle of the 20th century. The Williamson turn is reportedly named after a U.S. Navy officer who used it to recover a man overboard in 1943. 8 decades later, in an industry that markets itself with virtual reality decks and AI concierges, the standard playbook for finding a person in the water is, in part, World War II ship handling. While that maneuver unfolds, something else is happening below the bridge that almost no passenger ever sees. A second team begins reviewing closed-circuit television, not forward, backward. They scrub through hours of recorded video from cameras across the ship, trying to determine the last confirmed sighting of the missing person, which deck they were on, and which side of the ship they were near. Without that information, the search team has no idea where the ocean was at the moment of the fall. They are not chasing a person. At this stage, they are chasing a timestamp. This is the part of the rescue almost nobody pictures. What looks like a search and rescue operation is, in significant part, a video forensics operation. The ocean is too big to search blindly. The first job is to narrow ocean into a corridor, and the only way to narrow it is to find the moment on tape. Around the same time, the ship contacts the nearest National Rescue Coordination Center. In U.S. waters, that's the Coast Guard. From this point on, the cruise ship's role quietly shifts. It is no longer the lead rescuer, it is the witness. The real search is now run by Coast Guard helicopters like the Jayhawk and Dolphin, fixed-wing aircraft sweeping long patterns, and, critically, any commercial vessel in the area that can be diverted to scan a patch of water. The cruise ship continues to search, often well into the next day, But the people most likely to actually find a casualty alive are flying overhead in orange aircraft, or steering a container ship that happened to be on the right shipping lane. This is the second twist. In several of the best documented modern survival stories, the survivor was first spotted not by the cruise line that lost them, but by a stranger on a passing freighter. The cruise ship is the alarm. The merchant fleet is often the eyes. And here is where the deepest hidden layer in the entire system becomes visible. There exists right now technology that could collapse the detection gap from hours to seconds. Systems like the Mars Mobtronic combine radar, thermal cameras, and AI to monitor a ship's perimeter and automatically flag a human-sized object crossing the rail. ISO 21195, published in 2020, sets the performance standard. At least 95% detection probability, and no more than one false alarm per day on average. The systems work. They are commercially available. They are certified. They are also, in most of the global cruise fleet, not installed. The Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act requires ships to integrate this technology to the extent that such technology is available. That one phrase, written into the law in 2010, has effectively functioned as a soft compliance ramp for more than a decade. Cruise lines have argued at various points that the technology was not yet mature or not reliable enough or not standardized. ISO 21195 was supposed to close that argument. And yet, of the roughly 300 large cruise ships in commercial operation today, only a small fraction carry certified man-overboard detection. Some Carnival and Disney vessels have been reported to carry early-generation sensor packages. The rest mostly rely on rails, cameras, crew rounds, and someone eventually noticing an empty seat. The most important rescue tool, in other words, is not on most rescue ships. The rescue is being run with one hand tied behind its back by a regulation written by design to be optional. While all of this unfolds, the turn, the video review, the radio calls, the diverted freighters, the helicopter on the way, there is another clock that nobody on the ship controls. It belongs to the person in the water. In cold seas, hypothermia begins working within minutes. In warm seas, sun, dehydration, and exhaustion take over. Injuries from a 60 to 100-foot impact with the water can range from bruising to broken bones to unconsciousness. Currents can move a body miles in the time it takes a helicopter to scramble. The classic survival posture, the heat escape lessening position, knees to chest, body curled, head above water, isn't really advice. It is the last tool a person has against an ocean that has not noticed them. Step back from the deck and the broader shape of the system comes into view. What looks like one operation is really three overlapping ones pretending to be a single response. There is the ship's bridge, running historical turn maneuvers and coded PAs. There is the Coast Guard, running a modern satellite-coordinated grid search across a moving piece of ocean. And there is a regulatory framework full of soft-edge language that allows the most decisive piece of technology in the entire chain to remain optional equipment. The economic shape of that arrangement is worth saying out loud, carefully. Cruise overboard incidents are statistically rare on a per-passenger basis, roughly 1 in over a million. That rarity is exactly what lets the industry frame each case as a freak event rather than a system problem. Mandating certified detection across the global fleet would be expensive. It would generate publicly trackable alarm data. It would shift the conversation from tragic accident toward preventable event. The current arrangement is comfortable for almost everyone except the people in the water. The phrase "man overboard" suggests an event, a specific moment, a splash, a shout. The honest version is that it is more accurately a gap between when a person leaves the deck and when anyone realizes it. A gap between the technology that exists and the technology that's installed. A gap between the rescue most people imagine and the rescue that actually unfolds. The cruise ship, in that sense, is not really a rescuer. It is the trigger of a much larger, slower, more distributed search machine, scattered across coast guards, cargo vessels, and helicopters that may be hundreds of miles away when the alarm fires. It is the part of the system that knows first, and the part of the system best positioned to do almost nothing about it alone. Every story of a successful cruise, overboard rescue you have ever heard Grimes in the Gulf, K. Longstaff in the Adriatic. The small handful of others is, by definition, an outlier. They survived because of unusual stamina, unusually calm seas, unusually attentive strangers, or sheer luck. The quieter, more accurate story of how cruise ships rescue passengers who fall overboard is the one written in delay times, in regulatory loopholes, in ship handling maneuvers from another era, and in the silence of an ocean that, most of the time, simply wins. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new about one of the most fascinating engineering marvels ever built by mankind. If you want more content like this, please subscribe and hit that like button. I'm Larry, and this is the Ship Files. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.